We are very hopeful for the dialogue to start, serious dialogue based on the proper understanding and serious approach towards each other's interests and legitimate security concerns. As we repeatedly said, that we have absolutely no reason to invade Ukraine. It goes beyond the humanitarian and economic logic. Russia needs normal, predictable environment for the development, so as other normal states. We need equal dialogue, taking into account everyone's expectations. So what is really dangerous or threatening is that the West will further exaggerate its own intended hysteria. They need confrontation anyway, so to explain themselves why NATO is needed these days. And of course, to even more limit mutually beneficial cooperation between Russia and the European Union. So we don't have too much expectations. We can clearly forecast that eventual outcome will be the condition under which Europe will have to refuse from the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline to be replaced with more expensive American energy resources. So the irony is that they are even ready to pressurize their allies with no adequate reaction. Why? Because of the so-called Russian threat. That's it. We have to admit that the EU has completely lost its foreign policy independence. In response to our proposals, the West ignores them, like it ignored our suggestions for professional joint investigations on the MH17 crash in 2014, so-called use of Novichok and Salisbury, or poisoning of blogger Navalny. They don't need the truth. They need just a pretext for more and more sanctions against Russia because they are afraid of equal and just competition. If there is no reason for sanctions, the West does its best to invent it, even not facing security threats. That's why they are promoting a concept of a rules-based order, which is justifying sanctions against countries they don't like. If you have a look at the US or NATO troops map, regionally or globally, you would clearly realize the reality. The Western officials repeat the mantra about the Russian troops near the border of Ukraine as a source of escalation, but they keep silent on the initial reasons why it happened. So how many NATO offensive troops are in Europe, including those which are involved in the nuclear missions? How much lethal weapons they pumped into Ukraine? How intense are their anti-Russian military exercises, including in the Black Sea, and what the Western military advisors are doing in Ukraine? Additionally, let's not forget that after the US withdrawal from the Intermediate Missiles Treaty, they have to get their hands free to deploy missiles elsewhere, first of all in Europe, despite the fact that Russia offered moratorium for that, which was again ignored. So that's why the expansion of NATO is the existential threat to Russia, and legally binding guarantees of security based on the principle of undivided security and non-expansion of NATO are now the Russian red line. That's our message to NATO. Along with the repeated request not to use Ukraine as a geopolitical tool against Russia. So unless these demands are responded so well, we cannot, expect any serious feedback.
In case there are sanctions on Russia, financial sanctions are being contemplated. How is Russia and Moscow going to respond?
We have got used to sanctions. Sanctions is something which is a legal tool of competition. So, and our response would be, to apply for our Western partners to come to the dialogue and to resolve all the issues by peaceful means, only by equal and mutually respectful dialogue, by implementation of agreements and commitments, including the ones given by NATO in 1997, according to the Russia-NATO Council decisions about non-expansion, and the OSCE Istanbul Summit of 1999, which clearly fixed the principle of undivided security. Of course, we would also demand the West to influence Ukraine to implement the Minsk agreements, which provides for the direct dialogue between the Kiev authorities and the Russian-speaking Donetsk and Lugansk regions on ceasefire regime, special status of those regions, holding elections, etc., to be followed by the relevant constitutional amendments. Currently, Kiev is not willing to implement it, and that's why we are not. It is not interested in the security talks between NATO and Russia. That also, they also need confrontation to continue receiving the Western assistance, even at the expense of the Ukrainian historical identity. So sanctions is something which is, well, misused by the West in order to achieve their geopolitically motivated goals. He is our special and privileged strategic partner, and we have no reasons to doubt about the Indian independent and balanced position. You can clearly see it in the recent statements made in New York and Melbourne. We are very proud with our mutually trusted, equal, respectful, and pragmatic dialogue, as well as exceptional level of mutual understanding, taking into account each other's interests without any pressure or threat of sanctions or any hidden agenda. We are totally like-minded and stand for just, equal, and predictable multipolarity with the central role of the United Nations and international law, as well as unified agenda. We are not going to allow any external factor to disrupt our relationship. And we keep saying that we wish to have the same relations with all countries. Don't you think we would wish to recommend the Indian media not to rely too much on the Western information, especially media, which is clearly spreading disinformation, like the invasion already happened on, or something like that. So that's why our talk today is very important.
Do you feel that we will see tensions going down in the coming days?
We are very hopeful about that. At least Russia is ready and repeatedly said that we have always been ready for a serious dialogue, not just while we're using some cliches or anti-Russian, hysteria. We need a serious professional dialogue.
What solution is Russia looking for? How will the situation get resolved eventually, according to Russia? What is the kind of solution that you're looking for?
By peaceful means only by dialogue, only by the respect of each other's interests and legitimate security concerns. This is the only way out. Of course, implementation of agreements and previously made commitments also means a lot. So we would demand all that to happen.
What do you feel about the statements that have been coming from Boris Johnson and President Joe Biden that there will be a swift response by the US and allies in case there is any kind of attack on Ukraine or invasion of Ukraine?
Well, again, as I said, they need confrontation to explain themselves why they need NATO. And of course, they would take all the options at hand in order to mobilize the West to consolidate it further, in order to divert attention from their other problems, domestic problems, or inability to maintain equal cooperation in the continent. So that is something. This is just a geopolitical game, which is aimed at their own narrow-minded interests.